My name is Guy Stern. I'm the interim director of the Holocaust Memorial Center. I shouldn't get too close to this. The Holocaust Memorial Center, Zeckelman Family Campus. I am the interim director since the untimely and mourned death of our founder, Rabbi Charles Rosenzweig. In the name of the Holocaust Memorial Center, Zeckelman Family Campus, I should like to extend to all of you a most hearty welcome to this unique event, and to our Greek friends and neighbors appearing here under the aegis of the United Hellenic Organizations, I say, Thelo na kalosoriso tous Elines Philus Mas. These words go out with a hearty welcome to our distinguished visitors. I'm glad to report that Ambassador Anastasios Petrovas is in our midst. Your Excellency, might I ask you to rise to accept the greetings of this distinguished assembly. Our second distinguished visitor is Congressman Gary Peters in the new Congress. And Congressman, may I have the same welcome to you, and would you all, not in Greek this time, and may I ask you to rise. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to explore the horrors of the Holocaust during the German occupation of Greece, and also to celebrate the valiant rescue efforts of Greek citizens from all walks of life. The valiant rescue efforts of Greek citizens from all walks of life. The fact that even a small minority of Greek Jews and their proud centuries-old traditions survived is directly attributable to a bravely outspoken group of Greek citizens. Some years ago, I visited the city of Salonika and its magnificent ancient synagogue. It too owes its continued existence to a determined group of patriots ranging from caretakers to art historians who lived up to a conviction of Plato, one of the fountainheads of Greek philosophy. He said, "Good actions give strength to ourselves and inspire good actions in others." The synagogue stands thanks to the efforts of these dedicated people whom I met during my visit there, even though the Jews of Salonika have, with few exceptions, disappeared. The synagogue stands today as a symbol of a great tradition that once was. Perhaps today we stand at the beginning, at the threshold of a new tradition, the joining of two groups of citizens, the Hellenic community and the Jewish community, both of Greater Detroit, of Michigan, and of the Midwest. Let us strive for this kind of cooperation from this day forward. In extending this welcome, I'm joined by one of the outstanding leaders of our Holocaust Memorial Center, Dr. Steve Grant. He's the chairman of our board of directors a person whose unceasing support of this organization has sustained it through times of triumph and crisis. My friend, Dr. Grant.
Thank you, Guy. On behalf of the Board of Directors, the Oversight Committee, I would like to welcome everybody here today. I must say, since Rabbi Rosenzweig's death, there's been a great void in this organization. He was the heart and soul of the Holocaust Center. But I have to commend Dr. Stern for his steady and able hand since he was named interim director. So I'd like to give him a round of applause. The mission of the Holocaust Center is remembrance and education, and this gathering certainly fulfills those principles. I'm gratified to see the room filled today. I have to echo Dr. Stern's comments about the coming together of the Greek and Jewish community. I think that this is fantastic. We need more gatherings like this, and we will continue to make outreach to the community and hopefully continue to bring the message and educate as many people as we can. On a personal note, I have to say now that when I go to eat at the gallery, that when I see Stefan, I won't have to answer to him any longer because I've been promising him that this day would come for a while, and I'm glad it's finally here. So, for all his hard work. So again, on behalf of the center, welcome.
In behalf of the organizing committee, I want to thank you for being all with us. I want to recognize we're blessed to have with us our Metropolitan Nicholas of the Detroit Metropolis, Dr. Petrovas from Chicago. He was introduced earlier. We're very, very pleased to have him with us. He took a lot of time from his very busy schedule to be here with us. And of course, Congressman Peters, thank you so much for being with us. We're honored for all the work that Dr. Stern or Professor Stern and the organization of the center has done. They have been outstanding. It has been a pleasure working with them to make this thing possible. We also have great memories for the leader of this center, Rabbi Rosenzweig, who did so much, and he was the one that encouraged the idea of us getting together, two communities to get together. I cannot think of a better setting to have the lecture that's going to be coming up. We're also very, very grateful to Dr. Grant and the board of directors of this great center for dedicating, or actually they had a vote only a week ago, to dedicate a plaque to honor the Greek heroes of the Second World War for the things they did to save so many Jewish lives. And you're going to hear So we're going to have a nice plaque, and we're going to have a lot of things happening. It's going to come very, very soon. We also like to thank the members of the committee, and particularly Pete Drosos and Lisa, his wife, that has been very involved. They talked about Stefanos Becharis. He's the motivator behind the whole thing and the things that's going on and have done with the Frizis project is unbelievable. You're going to hear a little bit more about that. Also, the Tel Constant, where is he? Oh, he's here. He co-chairman of the Frizis fundraising for the statue that's going on. And then Art Vrentas is also with us. He has been behind the whole effort. We are delighted to have with us our next speaker. Less than 12 months ago, he was invited by the University of Michigan and the Foundation for Modern Greek Studies to present this lecture and by unanimous demand by the community, we said we have to bring him to Detroit. He is an exceptional Greek American of Jewish descent that has really lived through this and has done so much to really enhance the museum in Greece, the Holocaust Museum in New York, and throughout the whole country. He is truly graduate. I'm not going to take too much because we did give you some of the information we passed that has a sketch of his biography and the contribution that Dr. Mimi Cohen has done. He's an exceptional individual, and we're so proud to have you. And by the way, he's doing this without any honorariums, without nothing at all. He says, I want to come, I want to be with you, and we're grateful for really joining us and being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Professor Stern, Your Grace, Ambassador Petrovas, Congressman Peters, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to be in this incredible Holocaust Museum and talk to you about what happened in the Holocaust in Greece. Can you just pull the screen, please? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't even know that there is such thing like Greek Jews. When I first came to Chicago about over 30 years ago, people would say, Mimis Cohen from Greece, what's your real name? Kohenakis, Kohenopoulos? They couldn't really perceive that there are Greek Jews. The mouse is not working.
There you go.
Nope.
Yeah, it just worked.
I want to keep going. They didn't understand that, as a matter of fact, the first Jewish community in Europe was established in Greece almost 25 centuries ago. Furthermore, if you look in the Torah, the Greeks are mentioned as descendants of the descendants of Noah. And so it is very interesting that even now in Hebrew, Greeks are called Yavanim, coming from Ionia, which was the coast of now Turkey, where there were Greek communities at the time. And if you go a little further, you will appreciate that also Japhet is parallel to Iapetos, and Iapetos was the father of Prometheus. So you can put all these things together and you appreciate that there has been connection between the two nations for many, many centuries before history anyway. But the real history and the real connection between the Jews and Greeks started with Alexander the Great. It is questioned by historians if Alexander in fact visited Jerusalem in his way to occupy or to conquer the Persian Empire. But there is a lot of folklore in this direction from both Greek literature and Jewish literature. And according to Josephus, who was the historian of the first century, the high priest, which in Greek was called Jadus, marched out of the gates to greet Alexander and to prevent him from plundering the city. Alexander, and that's the folklore also, recognized in him the man with the white robes and long hair, the figure that once appeared in his dream and told him to go and encourage him to start the war against the Persians. And that's also in the Talmud. So since that time, Jews start moving in the Mediterranean before the diaspora, and they start establishing communities. The most important one was, of course, the community in Alexandria. And Alexandria, during the Hellenistic period, which was a period immediately after the death of Alexander the Great, was really the center of civilization, was what New York is now, the greatest city on earth. It was a cosmopolitan city. At the time, the Jews even lost the knowledge of their language because they spoke Greek, and they assumed Greek customs and manners up to a point. They maintained the religion. As you know also, this is the place where the Bible was translated into Greek. There is a tremendous body of literature talking about the connection between Judaism and Hellenism, but that's maybe the topic of another lecture. What we want to proceed, because I only want to introduce you to a short history of the Jews before we talk about of the Jews in Greece, before talking about the Holocaust. After the destruction of the temple by Titus, then the real diaspora starts, and as you can see in this map, there are many very important centers Jewish centers in the Mediterranean. And it was estimated that in the time between the 1st and 3rd century of the Common Era, 1/10 of the population of the Roman Empire, because all this was the Roman Empire, was of Jewish faith. And as you can see here, there are many communities in Greece. And we know that from many ways. Paul the Apostle, during his trips in preaching Christianity, he stopped and preached in the synagogues in Salonika, as you can see from this picture. Then he was in Veria, he was in Athens, he was in Corinth. There's the oldest synagogue on European soil is in the island of Delos. And for those of you who you might not be familiar with Delos, but you are probably familiar with the island of Mykonos, which is a wonderful touristic island, and Delos was the sacred island for the ancient Greeks. And there is a synagogue, and the archaeologists are calling this the throne of Moses. That's the oldest synagogue in Europe. And there are other synagogues, like in the Agora, in the foothills of the Acropolis, in Aegina, and in Corinth, and in many other places. We have historical and well-documented information about the presence of of Jews on Greek soil. Then, in the year 330, came the Byzantine Empire, and of course, the Byzantine Empire was inherited the Roman Empire, the East Roman Empire, and being the first Christian empire. Jews were in the mercy of the emperor, and there are some emperors that were very kind to the Jews, and there were some that were heavy-handed. However, there were never pogroms and auto-da-fés in the Byzantine Empire in the way that we know them in the Western Europe. The Byzantine Empire lasted over 10 centuries, and then came the Ottoman Turks. About the same time, Jews who were expelled from Spain, those are the porters of the very Catholic king and queen of Spain, Isabella and Ferdinand, and after the Edict of Granada in March of 1492, Jews were forced out. And the Sultan was very gracious to accept the Jews in the Ottoman lands, and a lot of Jews migrated to the Ottoman Empire at the time and found a very safe haven. So you can see again the migration, and Jews start migrating back to what is now Greece and Turkey, primarily in two cities, Constantinople or Istanbul, and Salonika. And if we go back to summarize, the origin of Jews of Greece is multiple. The original settlers were called Romagnots, from Romans, and you are looking at one of the rare specimens left. Sephardim are the Jews that came from Spain and Portugal. There were Jews that came from Provence in south of France and Italy. And finally, there was a group that came over different centuries and for different reasons, Ashkenazim Jews from Germany, Central and Eastern Europe. Let's go forward because in modern Greece, the modern Greek state starts after 1830, the Jews were allowed to work and practice their religion without restrictions. They spoke Greek because they were still the Romagnot part of the Greek Jews. They had all privileges and obligations of their Orthodox compatriots. They had, with few exceptions, a very good relationship with the Greek Christian population, and they observed the Sabbath and other Jewish customs. And this map shows how Greece, the Greek state, became bigger and bigger over the course of 1 century. And the reason that these maps are very important is as the Greek state is getting bigger, then more Jews are coming within the borders of the Greek state, particularly after a little before the First World War, where the northern part of Greece was back connected with Greece, because those were the main areas where the Jews from Spain, the Sepharad Jews, were living. So in the beginning of the 20th century, there were 27 organized Jewish communities in Greece. There were synagogues, schools, community centers, and the Jewish population was about 100,000 over a population of maybe 7 million people. There were synagogues, and Professor Stern just talked about the synagogue in Rhodes, which is a very beautiful synagogue. It's still a practicing synagogue, and unfortunately there are only 20 or 30 Jews in the island of Rhodes right now. But the synagogue is the oldest standing synagogue and practicing synagogue in Greece from the 16th century. And then look at the architecture, how it's changing. This is in Corfu, in the western islands of Greece, where the Venetians were there. And if you have been to Venice and the ghetto in Venice and the Jews and the synagogues in the ghetto, it will remind you of the ornate part. And that's again the synagogue in Corfu. And there are many more synagogues that are still available. This is the first synagogue in Athens, which was recently remodeled. It stands right across from the major synagogue of Athens. And this is the synagogue of Chalkis. You are wonderful in honoring Frizis, and we're going to talk about him in a minute, but this is where Frizis grew up. This is the town of Chalkis, which is about an hour away north of Greece, and there was a Jewish community in this place for many centuries, and even the Jewish community of Chalkis is mentioned in the trips of Benjamin de Tudela, who was a wonderful Jewish historian of the 11th century. And there were institutions, there were schools, there were hospitals, there were places where people were helping poor people. And Jews participate in the political life. You can see here the rabbi working along with the clergy at the funeral of King George I in Salonika. Here a picture of the rabbi in the first of the year liturgy in the Metropolitan in Athens. And also Jews were allowed to participate as all the Greeks in voting. Of course, that time it was only men, but not just for Jews, but for Christians also. And there were several members of the parliament that were Jews. And as everything else, and as everywhere else, Jews followed different political philosophies, and there were royalists and there were communists. As a matter of fact, this man, Avram Ben Aroya, is the founder, was the founder of the Socialistic Liberal Party of Greece, which then evolved as the Communist Party of Greece. And there were poor, rich people and big mansions, but primarily the population was very poor. As you see in the Holocaust Museum here, the life in the settles and in small villages. And again, there were rich merchants, but primarily there were peddlers and small business people. In Salonika, by the way, the porters in the port were all Jews. As a result, there was no activity in the port in Salonika on Shabbat. The port would close because all the porters were Jews. And again, as I said, there were great mansions. Some of them still exist in Salonika, but primarily Jews lived in poor and quarters. Salonika was the center of education for Jewish education. The first printing press in what is now Greece was established in Salonika in early 16th century, immediately after printing presses were established in Italy and in other places. And interestingly enough, the Ottomans would not allow their holy books printed. So therefore, the Jews took advantage, and there were a lot of holy books that were printed at the time, which helped education much more than other people. And in the first newspaper in Salonika was a Jewish newspaper in the middle of 1800s. And there were newspapers in Hebrew, in Greek, in Ladino, in French, because the Jews, they were very cosmopolitan and they spoke all these languages. And there were poets, as the poet Yosef Elia from Yanina, historians as Nehama, who wrote a wonderful 7 books on the community of the Jewish community of Greece, the history of the Jewish community, and painters like Giulio Caimi, who actually lived even after the Second World War. And there was wonderful music, there was theater, and wherever Jews were, they were blending with the environment. So you can, just by looking at these pictures, they are all Jewish families, but this one looks very Oriental, while these young ladies in the island of Rhodes are much more Western. And as we said, at this time, Jews had all the privilege of their Greek compatriots, but they had obligations, one of them being the military service. And here's a picture of my grandfather in the First World War, my father in the mountains of Albania during the Second World War, and myself as a young officer in the Greek Navy. But after this short introduction, let's go to the reason that we're here today, and this is the Second World War. And for those of you who are not very familiar, Italy declared the war to Greece on October 28, 1940. The Greeks fought in the campaign in what is now Albania, and this campaign was very successful for the Greeks because they were able to push the Italians deep inside Albania. During this campaign, almost 13,000 Jews fought with the Greek army. 513 were killed, 3,743 were wounded, out of which 1,300 seriously. And this is our hero, Colonel Mordechai Frizis. Why is he a hero? He was the highest ranking Greek officer, the first highest ranking Greek officer that was killed in the mountains of Albania about 40 days after the campaign started. And there were Jews, this battalion is called Cohen, that's the way we spell Cohen in Greek. And because Cohen is a Jewish name, so they didn't know what to call the battalion, and they called them the Cohen Battalion. there was financial support for the war, and we have documents of merchants sending money to the campaign and supporting the campaign, and there is a lot of communication. As I said, the Greeks were very successful in the campaign against the Albanians, but then Hitler came in the rescue of his partner Mussolini. So in April 6, 1941, the Germans entered Greece from the north. And so 3 days later, they enter in Salonika. And this is very important because, as you will see, this is the map of Greece, and Greece immediately after the occupation was divided in areas and sectors. So the Germans took the area next to, whatever is very dark is the Germans. The Germans took the area next to Salonika, and that was intentional, not only because Salonika had a great port, but also because Salonika had the largest number of Jewish population. The south was occupied by the Italians, and then a part of the north was occupied by the Bulgarians, who were also allies of the Axis, and they always had aspirations in having an exit in the Aegean. The Germans were so meticulous. We have documents that describe in detail what was happening, not only during the war, but in preparation for the war. And this is where, for instance, I saw a copy of this document in the museum also. This is the famous Wannsee conference where German officers met and decided about the final solution. And you can see one page of this report that has the number of the Jews by country. They were not 100% accurate because they didn't count Jews from the Dodecanese, the islands like Rhodes, that at the time were occupied by the Italians and some other areas. But they were pretty accurate around the 11 millions that they were describing there. And then this is another very important document because in 1941 the Germans sent this Sonderkommando Rosenberg. Why? Because they wanted to catalog where the money was, where the paintings were, where the carpets, where the jewelry, and they wanted to know where the money was. That's what it was all about. For 1 year, they left the Jews pretty much alone. They were hustling them, but nothing terrible. And then in July 16th, 1942, they gathered the Jews age 18 to 45 in the Eleftheria Square, which is Freedom Square. And the idea was, or the explanation was, that they have to see if these Jews are fit. It was tragic. A lot of people were brutally beat. They were fainting. They were sick people. And at the end of the day, they just round them up and they took them for forced labor. And they took them for forced labor in different areas of Greece. And interestingly enough, again, because of course the Holocaust, unfortunately, was about money a lot of times, and not about principles. And so they struck a deal with the Jewish community of Salonika, the Germans did, and they requested the equivalent of 63 million American dollars of today's dollars, approximately, which was an incredible amount for the time. And this is a copy of the check, one of the checks that the Jewish community of Salonika made in the name of the German occupying force. And guess what? The signature in the back of the check is this of Max Merten, who you will hear about him later, but he was the head of the administration in the Thessaloniki and the Aegean area. So they got the money, they allowed the Jews to come back to Salonika, the ones that had survived. As a collateral, because there was not enough money, the Jewish community were forced to give up the historic cemetery of Salonika, which is now grounds for the University of Salonika. And so you can see a picture in December 1942 that all it was all destroyed. But that was only the beginning. At this time, EAM, which was the National Front for Liberation of Greece, which was in a sense the resistance, they issued a petition. And it is very interesting because it is January 22, 1943, and this is when the Germans start rounding up the Jews of the North. And those are some sentences from this historic document. The occupiers are preparing for a new crime, this time against the Jewish part of the Greek people. This crime is not only directed against the Jews, but against the entire Greek people, because Greek Jews are an integral part of our people. During the recent Albanian campaign, Jewish children sacrificed their lives in the fight against fascism and for the freedom of our homeland. For these reasons, EAM, the National Liberation Army, asks the people of Athens and all Christian Greeks to help the Jews organize massive protests against this horrible pogrom. Let's give shelter to every persecuted Jewish family, down with the pogrom against the Jews, death to the occupiers and all their collaborators. Such documents don't really exist anywhere in occupied Europe. At the same time, Eichmann sends his right hand, Brunner, to Salonika so that he speeds up the move of the Jews of the North to the concentration camps. And here is a picture of the Jews marking, Egnatia Street is the main street in Salonika, and those are the Jews marching towards the man-made ghetto. There was no ghetto in Greece except for the Venetian-occupied islands. There was no real ghetto in Greece ever, but those are makeshift ghettos in specific neighborhoods in preparation for the trip to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And of course, the Germans were very meticulous. They were cataloging everything. They were keeping names of everybody, and they were creating ID cards for everybody. And this is an example of this, dated 21 of February 1943. This is a plan of Salonika, and you can see a significant portion of the city automatically became a ghetto. Another thing they did, because remember, the Holocaust or the persecution of Jews was about money, and a lot about money. So they asked the Jews to prepare wealth declarations. And here are the instructions. The Jewish community of Thessaloniki brings to the attention of these members that according to the order of the German authorities, the wealth declarations serve only for statistical purposes. Sure. It also forewarns its members that any deviation from detailed description and or negligence will incur the most severe punishment from the German authority. That means death. And so rich or poor Jews were forced to fill this and show their wealth and give it, in a sense, to the Germans for exchange of some fake Polish zlotys for the trip. And the Jews from Salonika were transferred to ghettos, as we said, and they were transferred to the concentration camps, primarily in Auschwitz-Birkenau, some in Treblinka, between March and August 1943. Jews from other cities occupied by the Germans and the Bulgarians were also transported to Auschwitz and other extermination camps. During this time, over 90% of the Jewish population of northern Greece was murdered. Those are copies of the tickets that they were given, and it says that in the back of the ticket, it says, remember, you cannot give this ticket to somebody else. under punishment. They were faking all this just to make sure that they will fool the Jews and get them in the trains. And of course they got them in the trains. At the same time, and this is, again, I was very pleased to hear that the board of the Holocaust Museum decided to honor some of our saviors. And this is a wonderful, very important figure, the Archbishop of Athens and all Greece, Damaskinos. I think in your handouts you have a copy of his incredible protest to the Germans. If you don't have it, this is the website that you can get it. But Damaskinos, and those are some experts of his protest, he says, in our national consciousness, all children of Mother Greece are inseparable unity. They are equal members of the national body, irrespective of religion or dogmatic differences. Our holy religion does not recognize superior or inferior qualities based on race or religion. As it is stated, there is neither Jew nor Greek, as in Galatians, and thus condemn any attempt to discriminate or create racial or religious differences. We hope that the occupation authorities will realize in due time the futility of the persecution of Greek Jews, who are among the most peaceful and productive elements of the country. And he threatens them, and he says, if, however, they insist on this policy of deportation, we believe that the government, as the bearer of whatever political authority is left in the country, should take a clear stance against these events and let the foreigners bear the full responsibility of committing this obvious injustice. He's now talking about the quisling Greek government of Prime Minister Logothotopoulos. And at the moment of judgment, the conscience of the nation will be heavily burdened by the moral responsibility shouldered by the rulers, especially if the powerful have failed to be noble-minded. Now, think what would have happened if in other places of Europe the organized church had taken this strong stand instead of, in some unique situations, taking side to the Nazis. That's just a question that will never have an answer. Again, there were more protests in the clandestine press in an effort to save our brother Jewish. Athens was a different story. Athens was occupied, as I said, initially by the Italians. What you see here are not children from Auschwitz or other concentration camps. Those are Greek kids in Athens during the famine of the winter 1941-1942. So the Greeks really didn't have, except for the ones that had some financial deals with the Germans, the vast majority of Greeks didn't really care about the Germans. In 1943, after the fall of Mussolini and the capitulation of Italy, the Germans take over Athens. And they bring in this character, Jürgen Stroop, who was the butcher of the Warsaw Ghetto, and they bring him in Athens with the understanding that he has to round up. Eichmann apparently was upset because they couldn't get the Jews in Athens. So they sent this guy, and within a few days, in every newspaper, in every wall, there is this directive for the Jews, and I'm sure you know the context because it was the same in everywhere in occupied occupied Europe. And in a few words, he expects all the Jews to sign up. They need to know their address, they need to know their money, they cannot go out of the house, they cannot have a radio, and on and on and on. But that was not the case. And in Athens, we didn't have the tragic events that we had in Salonika, because in Athens, there were some very important people that stood up. The first one, of course, was Archbishop Damaskinos. In the book by the eminent Greek writer Elias Venezis. He was his secretary, and he wrote the autobiography of Damaskinos. He writes that when Damaskinos, he went to the Germans and he petitioned for the Jews, and when he realized that that was in vain, then I crossed myself and prayed to God. I decided to save as many Jewish souls I could, even if I had to put my life in danger. And so he did. So what did he do? He ordered the clergy to provide any possible help to persecuted Jews by providing fake baptismal certificates. There are hundreds of them, and I have copies. Provide shelter in monasteries and convents, but above all, urge the priests to ask their congregations to hide the Jews in their homes. And so, for all his incredible services, Damaskinos, after the war, became viceroy in Greece during the turbulent years of the Civil War, and a cover at the Time magazine. And you can see him with Churchill when Churchill visited Athens in December of '44. When he died, Mentes Molho, who was at the time the president of the Jewish community of Salonika, said the following in his eulogy: "Only those who felt the agony of persecution can appreciate what it means to hear the moments you are haunted by the shadow of death, the voice of a man encouraging you. A man who has no fear of the enemy." We heard such voice, the voice of Damaskinos, at a time when others collaborated with the enemy or remained silent behind closed doors. In our hidden places, we felt his presence. Now, the proud Archbishop is standing in front of the main church in Athens, and you can see in the back of the pedestal, you can read it in English also, that there is a caption: when he was facing the Germans and the Stroop told him that he's going to kill him, he says, "The members of the clergy of Greece may not be shot, they may only be hanged," referring to what was happening during the time of the Ottomans. So please respect this tradition. And he slapped the door and he left. Damaskinos was not alone in Athens. He had the support of the chief of the police. He was the chief of the police under occupation. However, he was an agent of the intelligence service. As a matter of fact, all political parties of Greece asked him to stay, and he did, because he was, in a sense, their eyes and ears in the middle of Athens. So Everett ordered police stations to issue false IDs with Christian names. Now, those were not fake IDs, they were official documents, so they could pass as authentic from the German controls. And here's, for instance, that's an uncle of mine, Asser David. Then, a few months later, he becomes Stamatopoulos Dimitrios, official seals, and he survived German occupation. He also was honored after the war, and he remained in his post for many years. And then we have a third figure, and that's Rabbi Elia Barzilai. And knowing what happened in Salonika, where clearly the rabbi of Salonika, I hate to use the word collaborated, but he definitely played the game of the Germans, and he was very obedient to what they were telling him to do. On the contrary, Rabbi Barzilai was asked to provide information about the Jewish families. He said, "Give me 48 hours and I'll come back with all the information." He destroyed all the documents. He alerted the Jews, SOS, get out. And to this day, I've been interviewing many people, and it's a mystery how the Jews of Greece overnight vanished in Greek homes. And then, so that he is not held hostage by the Germans, he was taken by the resistance up in the mountains where he stayed till their liberation. You heard, and we talked about people that were very important in saving Jews, and this is another example. Zakynthos is...
Can you just take
Yeah.
the out? That's
okay.
better,
Okay.
because they can't hear you.
All right, thank you. Zakynthos is a small island in western Greece, and the story of this island is incredible because, as a matter of fact, if you don't know this young lady, Nadia Weinberg, her father is in the audience, there is a DVD that she produced about this story, which I highly recommend because the story is really incredible. What happened in Zakynthos happened nowhere else in occupied Europe. The Bishop Chrysostomos Dimitriou and Mayor Lucas Carrer were summoned by the Germans, and they demanded the usual, the addresses of the Jews. They left, and they came back the next day, and they refused to provide the German occupation authorities with a list of the Jews. And when they were pressed, they submitted a list including only 2 names, their own. In the meantime, they made sure that all Jews were provided shelter. So, in Zakynthos, there was not a single person loss of Jewish life in the island of Zakynthos. But there were many more saviors within the clergy, the resistance. There were foreign diplomats, and above all, ordinary people. There was Bishop Gennadios from Salonika, Bishop Gregory from Chalkis, who was instrumental in getting the Jews out of the city in the resistance and through boats to Turkey. There was the Bishop of Joachim of Volos. This is a handwritten letter that he produced September 28, 1943, which was the time that the Germans started persecuting Jews in the south. And he is asking whoever reads this letter, clergy primarily, to give shelter to the person who is carrying it, who was the rabbi of Volos. And then there were a lot of Jewish kids that went up in the resistance and fought with the Greek Orthodox and saved their life this way. Unfortunately, because as you might know, after the war there was a terrible civil war in Greece for many years that left incredible scars and wounds for many, many decades. All these stories were not told till much later. And this book was recently published on the Jewish resistance at wartime Greece, and it really talks about, in detail about what happened. This was Captain Kronos, Louis Cohen. Unfortunately, he just died a few months ago. And you see memorials in Greece commemorating the resistance, and among the Christians' names, you can read Jewish names because there were no separation. They were brothers and they were fighting together. Some joined the Greek forces in Egypt. And let's talk very briefly about some diplomats. The first one being Zamboni, the Italian Consul General of Italy in Salonika, who early on understood and knew what was going on. The Italians, by the way, refused to cooperate with the Germans when it came to deporting the Jews. So he gave a lot of Jewish families from Salonika fake Italian passports so they could then, and he escorted them through the German lines to the Italian occupied sector and in Athens and saved a lot of them. The same thing happened with Sebastian de Romero Radigales, who was the Consul General of Spain in Athens. As you probably appreciate, some of the Jews of Spanish heritage still spoke Ladino and still could claim their Spanish citizenship. So he fought and gave passports to a lot of them. And then there were transports of Jews in sealed trains that ended up in Spain. But that's another story. And then there is this man who I saw his photograph in the wall that honors our saviors. And Salaheddin ul-Kumen, he was the consul of Turkey in the island of Rhodes. Now, remember, Rhodes was occupied by the Ottomans, and after the First World War became a colony of the Italians. So when the Germans demanded the surrender of the Jews in Rhodes, he said, I'm claiming these citizens because they were born when Rhodes was under Ottoman Empire. And he insisted, and he took them out, and he crossed with a boat to Turkey, salvaging 50. And in reprisal of his actions, the Nazi authorities bombed his house, fatally injuring his pregnant wife. Then in Athens, in March 24 of 1944, the Germans, with their mean spirit, if nothing else, they announced that Passover was coming, so they would give matzah for Passover. And the few Jews that had decided to sign up with their lists went to the synagogue, and then they closed the door, and the rest is history. They arrested them, and they took them together with others, the Jews of Yanina and other communities. The result was tragic for Greece, and you can see that at the end, 86% of Jewish population of Greece perished. We know what happened, we don't know, but we've heard a lot of what happened in Auschwitz, because it's really impossible to figure out details of what happened. We know from several people details, and this is one of them, a very close friend of ours, who not only wrote her book that Professor Weinberg is now trying to translate in English, because it's really an important document. But in there you will see songs that the Jewish girls, when they were working in the concentration camps, they were singing. And what they were singing about sweet Greece, when I'll come back. And there was a revolt in Auschwitz, and Greeks were heavily involved. On Saturday, October 7, 1944, this is one of the participants. They were all Sonderkommandos. In other words, they were the people that were, they had to take the bodies out of the crematoria, take the teeth, the hair, whatever. And so they realized that the end was coming and the Germans would kill them. So they had a deal with the ladies that were working in some factories close by with ammunition, and they got enough ammunition. They were not very well coordinated, but the revolt, as a result of the revolt, crematorium number 4 went out of commission. Then there was a fire in crematorium number 3, so they really speed up the destruction of the crematoria, and there are several books describing the event, and in some documented stories it is said that towards the end they got up in the roof and they start singing the Greek anthem. Athens and most of the mainland of Greece were liberated in October 12, 1944. At the same time, Marcel Najari, he was in a concentration camp in Birkenau, and he was keeping a diary. Don't ask me how. And then he wrote there, I'm dying happy since I know that at this moment our beloved Greece is free. I will not survive, but I hope that my last words will survive. God bless Greece. The diary was found in Auschwitz, and it's now in the museum, if we can call it museum, in Auschwitz. And you can see again where he talks about Greece. And Marcel survived also Auschwitz and came back to Greece. They came back and there was total destruction. The Germans had even made a swimming pool from the tombs of the Salonika cemetery. Synagogues were destroyed. 86% of the Greek Jews perished during the Holocaust. And Greece, however, is the first country of occupied Europe to decree return of Jewish property to their owners or to the Jewish Central Council. This was unique again. It didn't happen 100% of the time, but it was much more advanced legislation than anywhere else in Europe. And Salonika, the proud mother of Israel, is turned to a ghost. They came from the camps and nobody could believe. They thought that they were really crazy, and when they started describing what happened. And tragically enough, some of them followed their Greek compatriots in exile during the time of the Civil War, and they were, again, Jews took part the same way that everybody else, and some of them were in exile in deserted islands in the Aegean, or even in Eldaba, a place where they were sending them from in Africa. The first memorials were followed by many weddings, because life goes on, and that was very important for this young generation of survivors. So then came the new generation. And then we start honoring our saviors. Here's the chief rabbi with the chief of the police, Evert. In the synagogue of Chalkis, the Bishop Gregory is getting honored. Here's Barzilai again. And they were all given certificates from Yad Vashem. This is Mayor Carrer. No, actually, this is the sister of Chrysostomos from Zakynthos getting the certificate on behalf of her brother that had already died. And this is Lucas Carrer getting his certificate. And now the two are together again. This is the ruins of the synagogue of Zakynthos, not because the Germans destroyed the synagogue, but the synagogue was destroyed by an earthquake in 1954, and so the Jewish community built a memorial for the two next to each other. And there are 253 Jews that were named as righteous among the nations. There were many more, but unfortunately the information was very scarce when the whole program started, and it's too late now to honor them because they are not alive. And this is a list of personal heroes. And what happened to the murderers? Well, Greece was a poor country, of course, and was totally devastated after the Second World War, and there was a civil war. So the German government started dealing, and sure, I'll take your tobacco, but I need something in return. Let them go. And this is a cartoon. This man was Walter Shimana, and he was a general in Athens. And the cartoon says that I'm going to Athens because I'm not going to get any penalty. Well, badly for him, he was arrested in France, and before his judgment, he hanged himself. And what happened to the murderers for Saloniki? Maximilian Merton, Adolf Hitler, Dieter Wisliński, Alois Brunner. Well, the Greek government was forced to change the law, tragically, so that they let go of Merton, who was arrested in Greece in 1957, and he was convicted in 25 years in prison. However, he only served few months, and then the Greek government was forced to release him, as I said, and he lived in the Federal Republic of Germany until 1961 without being bothered. Eichmann, you all know what happened to him. Dieter Wislenski, he testified in Nuremberg trial. Greece never requested his extradition to stand trial for his crime against the Jewish citizens. He was tried in Bratislava for complicity in the mass murder of Jews from Slovakia, Greece, and Hungary in 1948, and he was convicted to death, and the sentence was carried 2 hours later. Brunner is a mystery. He was never arrested. He was never tried in absentia. He was tried in absentia by France, but not Greece, and he disappeared. The rumors were that he was in Syria, and if he is alive, he would be now 96 years old. And Jürgen Stroop, the butcher of the ghetto of Warsaw, and the one who was responsible for what started happening in Athens, he was arrested wearing the uniform of a Wehrmacht officer, and he was claiming ignorance, and until 3 months later, when somebody recognized him, he was tried by the Americans in Germany, and then he was extradited in Poland because, as I said, he was responsible for what happened in the ghetto in Warsaw, and he was condemned to death, and he was executed in Poland. There are many memorials around the world, and more specifically in Greece, there are memorials in every city where Jews used to live. This is the memorial in Salonika, and this is the consul general, or actually the minister, foreign minister of Germany, in one of the ceremonies. And this is again our friend and hero, Frizis. This is his bust that was that is now in Salonika. There were 1.5 million innocent children that were murdered during the Holocaust, out of which 13 million Greek kids, and there is a plaque commemorating this. And for those that still believe that the Holocaust never happened, or they deny the numbers, here are names and dates for some people that we lost. This is the list from the island of Rhodes, the list from the island of Corfu, and just the Cohens from the Yanina. There are squares of Jewish martyrs. There are synagogues now without Jews, like the synagogue in the island of Kos or the synagogue in the city of Veria. But we're making some progress also. This is the synagogue in Chania, which was in ruins. It's a historical 16th century synagogue. And thanks to this wonderful man, Nikos Stavroulakis, who was the initial curator of the Jewish Museum on Athens, and now he's totally responsible for his project. The synagogue is back alive. There are no Jews, but there are weddings, there are bar mitzvahs, and it works also as a community center. But the cemeteries are abandoned, the graves are abandoned. However, people finally start writing. It might be a little too late, but we start getting concrete information of what happened during these tragic times. And we have a lot of books in detail knowing what happened. And how can you write when you have been Sonderkommando and you have to take to the oven your relatives and your friends? But that's one example he did, and he wrote a very moving book on the memoirs on a Sonderkommando. And then there is the violinist of Auschwitz. He was from Salonika, and he survived by a miracle. He spoke German, he played the violin, and he was a certified engineer. So he managed his way through, and he wrote again a superb book on his experience. And there is Rosa Pardo. There are many, many books, but again, she was 7, and she kept a diary, and it's very interesting because it's a 7-year-old girl writes about her fears and her experience. She published the book many years later, and it's again, now the book is in English also, but the good thing is that she has her on the page of when she was 7 and her thoughts now. And it's very interesting because she really is not bitter in the way you would have expected. And there are many, many books, as I said, and now we have a Jewish museum in Athens, and we're very proud of it. It's a great museum. If you visit Athens, you should go and visit. It's not just a museum, but as this space here, it's a living space. There are a lot of exhibits. One of them is the hidden children of the occupied Greece, which we hope to bring here at some point. Another thing they do is they teach the teachers in Greece. It's mandatory to teach the Holocaust in high school. So the museum has taken the initiative to teach the teachers how to teach the Holocaust. And there is a wonderful museum in Thessaloniki also where you can see a lot of the very rich history of the city and the Jews. And this, by the way, is the press that they were making stars before the deportation. Another thing that is happening now is the revival of Judeo-Spanish culture, which is a movement across the world. But the feeling is that it's kind of a little too late because a lot of these people are gone. The Greek Parliament proclaimed the 27th of January as National Remembrance Day for Greek Jews, martyrs, heroes of the Holocaust. This is mandate across Europe and the United Nations, and this is the day that coincides with the liberation of Auschwitz by the Russian troops. So you can see there are a lot of events happening every time, January 27. This is in 2007. The mayor of Athens, various political figures in the synagogue in Athens, and the late Archbishop of Athens in front of the pedestal of Damaskinos. So now the Jews are not ashamed anymore to show their numbers, and this is, unfortunately, the end. We're coming to the end of this generation, and tragically enough, they carry their numbers and their experience even to their graves. So, I think I gave you a quick overview of what happened in Greece over the Holocaust, and it's now up to the new generation to remember. Thank you.
Dr. Korn, we thank you so much. It was an outstanding lecture. We really appreciate you being with us. At this point, because we have a limited amount of time, he would be returning back to Chicago. We will take some questions if you have any.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Pollack, how do you account for the fact they were so heroic?
Well, you know, the question was, how do I account for the fact that there were so many heroic people? And I think,
As opposed to other European countries who don't see this.
well, I can only speak about what happened in Greece. And I think what happens is what happens anytime where people under stress. You really show your character, not when you are in your ordinary life and you have your nice house and you have your routine, but when you are under stress or when your back is against the wall. That's where people show who they are. And these people, that's why they are our heroes, because they proved themselves in a big way.
My name is George Rowan. I come from a city of Greece, northern Greece, by the name of Kastoria. We had almost 3,000 Jews living in our city. And we used to get along beautifully. Most of the stores were owned by the Jews. And my dad was also a storekeeper. And he used to do business with a department store who was owned by a man by the name of Ben. But my dad immigrated to this country, and when I went to register at the high school, my dad wrote me, he says, you have to have a guardian. The school demanded a guardian. So he says, you have to have Ben as your guardian. But I said, what about my uncle, your brother? He says, never mind. He's the most honest man on earth. So when I went to register, the teachers, the professors, says, I didn't know you were Jew. But we used to get along good. Unfortunately, during the occupation, they were all taken. And I understand what my mother told me. I brought her here from Castellar. She says they built a special railroad into near Thessalonica and dumped the whole train with the Jews into the sea. That's what my mother told me, and that's what was the news at the time. How true it is.
I think she might be referring to what happened to the Jews of the north, but not of Castoria, but of Kavala, which was under the Bulgarian occupation. And the Bulgarians, in Bulgaria, they were very good to the Jews, but they had to be good to the Germans because they wanted this piece of real estate of Greece. So they put the Jews in trains, and then when they were crossing the Danube, they had them in barges, and some of the barges sank. So that might be the story you know.
And another thing is, my best friend in high school was a Jewish boy by the name of Russo. He went to Palestine after he graduated, and became a general in the army of the Jewish army.
Thank you.
I responded under the war. I went in the army here, overseas, and we lost each other.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
How do you explain Greece having 87% of the Jewish population perished, and now you're telling us that the population was so friendly to the Jewish people? I just can't understand it.
Well, there are many explanations. The most important explanation is that the vast majority of Jews were in the north. So the explanation is geography. The north was immediately occupied by the Germans. Immediately. At the time, there was no resistance yet. In 1941, there was no resistance. Resistance started developing after 1942. The Jews in Salonika, which by themselves were 56,000, okay, they were trapped in Salonika. As a result, and then as we talked about earlier, there were the Jews in northern Greece that were in the Bulgarian sectors. These people had no chance, were never given a chance. It didn't matter if Greeks would try to hide them. You cannot hide 1/3 of the population. In Athens, they were a minority, a small minority. Another thing is, in Athens, they spoke Greek the way I speak Greek, with no accent. In Salonika, a lot of them spoke Ladino as their first language. They couldn't hide. There was no place to go. Some of them ultimately went to the resistance. The third thing, which is very important, is the sense of family that the Jewish kids have and had. These kids had the opportunity to go to the mountains with some gold sovereigns and survive, and they wouldn't leave their older parents. So here are three very important ways or reasons to appreciate. I know I cannot answer all the questions, and there are a lot of questions that are unanswered, but the truth is that there was no place for the Jews to go, to hide.
I would just like to add that one of my best friends, George McCullough's family, lived there in Salonika, and as the Jews were marching along the tracks, they set up tables to offer water to the Jews, and he was one of the boys. There were a number of them that were handing out pieces of paper in different languages, and if the Jews understood, and some of them were in Hebrew, they offered anyone to be taken back to the church for food and these false documents. So he was part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. At this moment, we like to take a couple minutes to bring you up to date of what's happening with the Frizis monument or memorial that's been in Telemachos. Constant, you're going to be coming up? Let me say a couple of things for those of you. This is a project that started about 4 years ago. The Friends of Frizis, which is basically the gentleman here, and Stefanos Becharas, that's the driving force behind the whole project, started about 4 years ago. And at the time, when they were projecting how much the cost will be, the dollar had a tremendous amount of value in relation to euro. But since then, things changed, and the price have more than doubled. But we need to really highly commend them because they were successful. They worked hard, and both communities supported this project. And the project is to the point right now we have approval by the city, and he's going to tell us all about it. And it's ready to go on. It's going to be something that everybody can be proud. You also should know that on an annual basis, the Hellenic community, when we meet in in Washington, D.C., we look at the senators and congressmen of Jewish descent who have been supportive with Hellenic issues, and we've been giving them the the Frizis Award. And Senator Levin was the award recipient this past year. So this is something that's really working, and it's a tremendous amount of credit that we have to give to Stefanos Becharas and Telemachos for really taking this project on behalf of the Foundation of Modern Greek Studies, and it's finally coming to fruition.
Thank you very much, George.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I want to thank the American Hellenic Congress and the committee and Dr. Cohn for budgeting their time so that we could take a few moments to bring you up to date on the Friends of Colonel Frizis. We won't take very much time. I was referred to as Telemachus. I'm otherwise known as Tel Constant in everyday life. But most of the time, in our family at least, I'm known as Dave Neary's father-in-law. Anyway, Dave has prepared a little presentation, which won't take very long. And after that, I'd like to say a few words. Go ahead, Dave.
Excuse me, folks. Sorry.
No, I gave it to somebody to give to you. Get on her case, because it's cruel. It was very cruel. I found it. I can't. It's very it's really I get it.
I would like, oh, we've got the link here. Yes. Thank you. Time doesn't permit me to thank everybody individually for the effort, the moral support, financial support that has been given to us. I think it's appropriate, though,
You have to speak into the mic.
okay, to say one thing. I think we are as happy, as lucky as we could possibly be to live in a country such as the United States of America that permits us to enjoy a day such as we do, are enjoying today. Where else but in the United States of America can an event such as this be observed? I do need to say just a couple of thank yous for Metropolitan Nicholas for blessing us with his presence today. I want to recall Rabbi Rosenzweig, who was instrumental in getting the ball rolling for us months ago in this event, and the continuation of the assistance of Professor Stern and the Holocaust Memorial Center, so that we can reassert with power and grace the history and the identity of the Hellenic compassion. Thank you all very much.
We thank you very, very much. We appreciate joining us today. We have a reception in the back. Unfortunately, our guests from Chicago have very little time. They have to get to the airport, and although they wanted to visit with us, they're not going to be able to do that. You may get a chance to say hello in your way out. Thank you very much. We appreciate for you.
We do have a presentation for the doctor.
We have a little presentation to make.
You do?
Yeah.
That's nice.
Hey, please give us a couple of minutes before you leave, everybody.